I watched through my kitchen window as a construction crew began unloading cinder blocks onto what looked like my side yard, and my coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. 3 workers in orange vests were marking off the ground with spray paint while a cement mixer rumbled to life, drowning out the morning birdsong in my quiet Scottsdale, Arizona neighborhood. I hadn't authorized any construction. I hadn't even been notified. Setting down my mug with a sharp clink against the granite counter, I strode outside in my house slippers and pajama pants, still half convinced this was some kind of mistake. Maybe they had the wrong address. Maybe they were working on the neighbor's property and had accidentally wandered onto mine. "Excuse me," I called out, raising my voice over the machinery. "Can someone tell me what's going on here?" A burly man with a clipboard turned to face me, squinting against the morning sun. "You the homeowner?" "I'm Richard Bryant. I own this property, and I'd like to know why you're setting up equipment on my land without my permission." He consulted his clipboard, flipping through several pages. "Says here we're contracted to build a privacy wall along this property line. Work order came through the Saguaro Ridge HOA, signed by a Barbara Henderson. You're in the HOA, right?" My jaw tightened. Barbara Henderson. Of course it was her. The woman had been a thorn in my side since I'd moved into this neighborhood 3 years ago. She'd sent me violation notices for having my garbage cans visible from the street for more than 2 hours after pickup, for painting my front door a shade of blue she deemed too vibrant, and for planting desert marigolds instead of the approved landscaping options. "I'm in the HOA, but nobody consulted me about building a wall on my property," I said, feeling my blood pressure rising. "You can't just show up and start construction." The contractor scratched his head, looking uncomfortable. "Look, mister, I just do what I'm paid to do. The HOA gave us the go-ahead, showed us the property survey, said this wall needed to go up. Something about visual obstructions and property values." Visual obstructions? Property values? I looked around my immaculate yard. I'd spent countless weekends maintaining the desert landscaping, keeping everything pristine and drought-friendly. My house was one of the nicest on the block. "There's nothing wrong with my property." "Don't shoot the messenger," the contractor said, holding up his hands. "You want to dispute it, take it up with your HOA. We've got a job to do." I pulled up my phone and immediately dialed the HOA office number I'd unfortunately memorized over the years. It rang 4 times before someone picked up. "Saguaro Ridge Homeowners Association, this is Deborah speaking." "Deborah, this is Richard Bryant at 4752 Desert Willow Lane. There's a construction crew at my house right now, claiming they're building a wall on my property. I was never notified about this, never consulted, nothing. What's going on?" There was a pause, the sound of typing. "Let me pull up your file, Mr. Bryant. Okay, yes, I see here that the Architectural Committee approved construction of a privacy barrier along your western property line. The notice was mailed to you 2 weeks ago." "I never received any notice," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "And even if I had, you can't just build something on my property without my explicit consent. According to the HOA bylaws, Section 12, Paragraph 4, the association reserves the right to make improvements to common areas and to construct barriers when necessary to maintain neighborhood standards and aesthetics. This isn't a common area. This is my private property. The survey shows the wall will be constructed along the property line between your lot and the community walking path. That makes it a shared boundary with common space, which falls under HOA jurisdiction." I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. "I want to speak with Barbara Henderson, right now." "Mrs. Henderson is the HOA president and is quite busy. I can schedule you for the next board meeting in 2 weeks." 2 weeks? There are workers with cinder blocks in my yard right now. I need to speak with her today." Another pause. "I'll see if she's available. Please hold." The hold music was an instrumental version of some unrecognizable pop song, and I paced back and forth across my driveway while the construction crew continued their prep work. I could see them measuring, marking, making plans to permanently alter my property. The western side of my lot had a beautiful open view of the walking path and the desert preserve beyond it. That's one of the reasons I'd bought this house. A wall would block that view entirely. "Mr. Bryant," Barbara Henderson's crisp voice came through the phone, and I could practically hear the condescension dripping from each syllable. I understand you have concerns about the approved construction project. Concerns? Barbara, you're building a wall on my property without my permission. That's not a concern. That's illegal. I assure you everything we're doing is perfectly legal and within the scope of the HOA's authority. Perhaps if you'd attended more board meetings, you'd be aware of the initiatives we've been implementing to improve neighborhood aesthetics. Improve aesthetics? My yard looks great, better than half the houses on this street. That's a matter of opinion, Barbara said coolly. Several neighbors have complained about the various items you store on that side of your house, garden tools, equipment, that sort of thing. It's visible from the walking path and detracts from the community's appearance. I have a small tool shed that's completely screened by desert willows. You can barely see it from the path, and it's certainly not an eyesore. The architectural committee disagrees. The wall's going up, Mr. Bryant. I suggest you cooperate with the contractors to make the process as smooth as possible. Any interference will be considered a violation of HOA regulations and will be met with appropriate fines. You can't just... But she'd already hung up. I stared at my phone in disbelief, anger coursing through my veins. This was beyond petty HOA overreach. This was a direct assault on my property rights, and I wasn't going to stand for it. Storming back to the contractors, I held up my hand. I'm sorry, but I can't let you proceed. This construction is not authorized by me as the property owner, and I'll be seeking legal counsel. The head contractor sighed heavily. Look, Mr. Bryant, I sympathize. But we have a contract with the HOA, and they have legal authority here. If you physically prevent us from doing our job, we'll have to call the police for interfering with contracted work on HOA property. It's my property. That's between you and your HOA. We're just the construction company. I realized I was fighting the wrong battle. These guys were just trying to do their job. The real problem was Barbara Henderson and her petty vendetta against me. I needed to approach this differently. Fine, I said. Do what you have to do, but this isn't over. Back inside my house, I immediately started researching property law and HOA regulations in Arizona. My wife, Margaret, had passed away 4 years ago from cancer, and I'd moved to Scottsdale for a fresh start, to be closer to our daughter. The house had seemed perfect at the time, despite the HOA. Now I was regretting not reading those bylaws more carefully. As I scrolled through legal websites and Arizona statutes, my phone rang. It was my daughter, Olivia. "Hey, Dad," she said brightly. "Just calling to check in. How are you doing?" "Honestly, not great." I explained the situation with the construction crew, the wall, and Barbara Henderson's dismissive attitude. Olivia was quiet for a moment. "They're building a wall on your property? Without your written consent?" "According to them, they sent me a notice 2 weeks ago. I never got it, and Barbara claims they have the authority under HOA bylaws because it borders a common area." "Dad, that doesn't sound right. Even HOAs have limits on what they can do with private property. Let me look into this." "I don't want to drag you into my problems," I said, though relief flooded through me. Olivia was smart, capable, and had a way of cutting through bureaucratic nonsense. "Dad, you're not dragging me into anything. This is literally what I do for a living. I'm the city planning director, remember? I deal with property rights, zoning issues, and permits every single day. If your HOA is overstepping, I'll know." That's right. My daughter had worked her way up through Scottsdale's city planning department over the past 8 years, earning her position through competence, dedication, and an encyclopedic knowledge of city codes and regulations. If anyone could help me navigate this mess, it was Olivia. "What's your HOA called again?" she asked. "Saguaro Ridge Homeowners Association." "And the president is Barbara Henderson?" "Unfortunately, yes." Olivia made a thoughtful sound. "Give me a few hours. I'm going to pull their permits and see exactly what they filed with the city. Any construction project like this needs city approval, not just HOA approval. If they're building a wall of any significant size, they need proper permits." After we hung up, I felt marginally better. At least I had someone knowledgeable on my side. I spent the rest of the morning watching the construction crew set up forms and prepare the foundation for the wall. It made me sick to watch, but I documented everything with photos and videos, making sure to capture the property boundaries and the work being done. Around noon, my neighbor Tom Chen came over, concern written across his face. Tom and I had become friends over the past few years, bonding over our shared disdain for Barbara Henderson's authoritarian approach to HOA management. "Richard, what's going on? Why are they building a wall?" I explained the whole situation, and Tom's expression grew darker. "This is insane," he said. "Barbara's been on a power trip lately, but this crosses a line. Did you know she tried to fine the Martins for having their granddaughter's tricycle visible in their driveway? A tricycle! Doesn't surprise me," I muttered. "She's determined to make everyone miserable in the name of property values." "You know what I heard?" Tom lowered his voice, glancing around as if Barbara might be lurking in the bushes. "Apparently, she's trying to increase all the HOA fees by 40%, claims it's for neighborhood improvements, but I think she just wants a bigger budget to throw her weight around." 40%? I shook my head in disgust. "We already pay enough. Where's that money even going?" "Good question. There's been talk among some of the neighbors about calling for a special election, voting her out. But she's got a few loyalists on the board who do whatever she says." We watched the construction crew pour concrete for the wall's foundation, and I felt a renewed surge of anger. This wasn't just about a wall anymore. This was about accountability, about protecting homeowners from tyrannical HOA boards that had forgotten they were supposed to serve the community, not rule over it. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Call me when you can. Found something interesting." I immediately dialed her number. "What did you find?" "Dad, your HOA never filed for a construction permit with the city. I checked all our records and there's nothing. No application, no approval, nothing." "What does that mean?" "It means they're conducting unpermitted construction, which is illegal. Any structure over a certain height or that affects property drainage, utilities, or access requires city approval. A wall of the size you're describing definitely qualifies." "So they're breaking the law?" "They're breaking city ordinances, yes. But here's where it gets interesting. I also pulled the property survey they would have needed to file. According to our records, the property line they're claiming is incorrect. The actual boundary extends about 3 feet further west than where they're building." My mind raced. So they're not just building without a permit, they're building on the wrong spot? "It appears that way. I'm coming over after work to take a look myself. In the meantime, I'm going to have our code enforcement officer pay a visit. If they're doing unpermitted work, we can issue a stop work order." "Olivia, thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you." "You'd figure it out, Dad. You're stubborn like that, but I'm happy to help. Barbara Henderson is about to learn that being HOA president doesn't put you above city regulations." About an hour later, a white truck with City of Scottsdale Code Enforcement emblazoned on the side pulled up to my house. A man in his 30s with a tablet in hand stepped out and introduced himself as Derek Walsh, Code Enforcement Officer. "Mr. Bryant, I'm here about the construction on your property. Can you show me what's going on?" I walked him around to the side yard where the crew had nearly finished the foundation work. Derek took photos, made notes on his tablet, and then approached the head contractor. "I need to see your permit for this construction." The contractor looked confused. "Permit? The HOA hired us. They said they had everything approved. All construction within Scottsdale city limits requires appropriate permits filed with the city planning department. Do you have documentation of permit approval?" "I've got the HOA work order and contract." The contractor pulled out his paperwork and Derek examined it carefully. "This isn't a city permit. This is just an internal HOA document." Derek pulled out a bright orange sticker from his bag. "I'm issuing a stop work order effective immediately. No further construction can proceed until proper permits are obtained and approved by the city planning department." The contractor's face fell. "Are you serious? We've already poured the foundation." "I'm very serious. Continuing work without a permit can result in fines up to $5,000 per day, and the city can order demolition of any unpermitted structures. I suggest you contact whoever hired you and inform them they need to file the proper paperwork." Derek slapped the orange sticker onto the cement mixer, and the legal language was clear. Any further work was prohibited. The construction crew began packing up their equipment, muttering among themselves about incompetent clients who didn't know how to pull proper permits. I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. Barbara Henderson had been so confident in her authority that she'd forgotten to follow basic legal requirements. It was a rookie mistake, and it was going to cost her. Derek turned to me. "Mr. Bryant, I've documented everything. You'll receive a copy of the stop work order via email, and the HOA will be required to either obtain proper permits or remove the foundation that's already been poured. If they try to continue construction without permits, call me immediately." "I will. Thank you so much for coming out here." As Derek drove away and the construction crew finished loading their equipment, I noticed Barbara Henderson's silver Mercedes pulling up to the curb. She got out, her perfectly styled blonde hair not moving an inch in the breeze, her expression one of barely controlled fury. "What is going on here?" she demanded, marching toward the contractor. "Why are you packing up? You're supposed to be building a wall." "Lady, we got shut down by code enforcement. You didn't pull permits." "Permits? I'm the HOA president. I don't need permits for HOA property improvements." "It doesn't work that way," the contractor said, clearly tired of dealing with this situation. "The city says no permit, no construction. Take it up with them. We'll send you a bill for the work we've completed so far." He climbed into his truck and drove off, leaving Barbara standing in the street. She turned her glare on me. "You did this. You called the city." "I exercised my rights as a property owner," I said calmly, though inside I was relishing every second of her discomfort. "Maybe next time you'll follow proper procedures before trying to build on someone else's land." "This isn't over, Mr. Bryant. The HOA will file the necessary paperwork, and that wall will go up whether you like it or not." "We'll see about that." Barbara stalked back to her car, and I watched her drive away with a sense of vindication. But I knew she was right about one thing. This wasn't over. Barbara Henderson didn't strike me as the type to accept defeat gracefully. That evening, Olivia came over with a large portfolio of documents. We spread them out across my dining room table, and she walked me through the property surveys, zoning regulations, and building codes. "Here's the thing, Dad. Even if they file for a permit, it's unlikely to be approved in the location they were planning." "Why not?" "Because of drainage patterns and utility easements. See this?" She pointed to a map showing underground infrastructure. "There's a major water line running right where they want to build that wall. City code requires a minimum setback of 6 feet from any major utility line. They can't build there without relocating the water line, which would cost tens of thousands of dollars. So the whole project is essentially dead. Unless they want to move the wall 6 feet onto your property, which would be even more illegal, yes. And even if they did move it, they'd need to demonstrate that the wall doesn't negatively impact drainage patterns. This area has strict water runoff regulations because of flood control. A wall in the wrong place could redirect water onto neighboring properties during monsoon season." I sat back, absorbing all this information. Barbara has no idea what she's gotten herself into. No, she doesn't. And here's where my position gets a little tricky. Olivia looked at me seriously. "As city planning director, I can't show favoritism or make decisions based on personal relationships. Everything I do has to be by the book." "I understand. I wouldn't want you to compromise your integrity. That said, by the book, their permit application is going to have major problems. When they do file it, and they will, my department will review it objectively. If it doesn't meet code, and I'm 99% sure it won't, we'll deny it. They can appeal, but the appeal will go to the City Planning Commission, not to me." "What should I do in the meantime?" Olivia pulled out another set of documents. "I took the liberty of researching your HOA's bylaws and articles of incorporation. There are several provisions they've violated in this process. First, any expenditure over $10,000 requires approval by vote at a general homeowners meeting. A wall project like this would easily exceed that amount, and I don't see any record of a vote. I definitely wasn't notified of any vote. Second, any construction that directly affects an individual property requires written notification to that property owner at least 30 days in advance, with an opportunity for the owner to present objections to the board. You said you never received notification?" "Never." Barbara claimed they mailed something, but I checked my mail every day. Nothing came. That's a clear violation of their own bylaws. Third, and this is the big one, the HOA doesn't actually have the authority to build permanent structures on private property without the owner's written consent. The section Barbara cited about common areas only applies to actual common areas. Like the clubhouse or the walking paths. Your side yard isn't a common area just because it's adjacent to one. So she was lying? She was either lying or grossly misinterpreting the bylaws. Either way, you have grounds to take legal action against the HOA if you want to. I considered this. Legal action meant lawyers, court dates, stress. But it also meant holding Barbara accountable and preventing her from doing this to other homeowners. Let's see how the permit situation plays out first, I said. If she keeps pushing, I'll consider it. Over the next week, things were quiet. The foundation they'd poured sat there like a scar on my property, a concrete reminder of Barbara's overreach. I called the contractor to ask about removal, and he informed me that the HOA was responsible for that since they'd hired him. When I contacted the HOA office, Deborah told me they were waiting for permit approval before deciding next steps. Then, 10 days after the stop work order, I received a notice in my mailbox. This time, it was definitely delivered. It was a citation from the HOA for maintaining an unfinished construction site that detracts from neighborhood aesthetics. The fine was $500. I read it 3 times, unable to believe the audacity. They'd created the mess, and now they were fining me for it. I called Olivia immediately. "You're not going to believe this." After I read her the citation, she was silent for a long moment. "Dad, I think it's time to go to the media with this. Barbara Henderson is out of control, and other homeowners need to know what kind of person is running their HOA. The media? I have a contact at the Arizona Republic who covers community issues. This is exactly the kind of story they love. HOA overreach, illegal construction, retaliation against homeowners. It's got all the elements. I don't want to be in the newspaper. I know, but sometimes you have to shine a light on bad behavior to stop it. Trust me, once this goes public, the other homeowners will start speaking up. Barbara's power comes from people being afraid to challenge her. Take away that fear, and she's just another bully." Reluctantly, I agreed. Olivia connected me with a reporter named Jessica Mendoza, who came to my house the next day. She was a young woman with sharp eyes and a recording device that she set on the table between us after asking permission. "Mr. Bryant, tell me what's been happening." I walked her through everything: the surprise construction, Barbara's dismissal of my concerns, the lack of permits, the stop work order, and now the retaliatory fine. Jessica took notes, asked probing questions, and photographed the abandoned foundation in my yard. "This is good," she said. "Really good. I mean, not good for you, but it's an important story. HOA abuse is a huge issue in Arizona, and most of it goes unreported because homeowners are afraid of retaliation. The fact that they're now fining you for a problem they created is exactly the kind of overreach that needs exposure." "What happens after you publish the story?" "It depends. Usually, public scrutiny forces organizations to reconsider their actions. The HOA board might distance themselves from the president, or homeowners might start demanding accountability. At minimum, it creates a record of what happened, which can be useful if you end up in court." The story ran 3 days later on the front page of the local news section. Scottsdale HOA's illegal construction project leads to homeowner harassment. Jessica had done a thorough job, interviewing me, quoting Derek Walsh from Code Enforcement, and even getting a terse no comment from Barbara Henderson. The article detailed every step of the debacle and included photos of the abandoned foundation and the retaliatory fine notice. My phone started ringing almost immediately. Tom Chen called to say he'd seen the article and was organizing a petition among homeowners to call for Barbara's removal. Other neighbors I barely knew reached out to share their own stories of Barbara's harassment, fines for trivial violations, and general tyranny. The most surprising call came from an attorney named Patricia Hughes. "Mr. Bryant, I represent 3 other homeowners in Saguaro Ridge who are dealing with similar issues with Mrs. Henderson. I read the article about your situation, and I'd like to discuss representing you pro bono." "Pro bono? Why?" "Because I'm building a class action case against HOAs that abuse their authority. Your situation is particularly egregious, and it could be the flagship case that sets precedent for protecting homeowners' rights. If you're interested, I'd like to meet with you and discuss your options." I met with Patricia the following day at her office in downtown Scottsdale. She was in her 50s, impeccably dressed, with a reputation for taking on difficult cases and winning. "The beautiful thing about your situation," she explained, "is that you have clear documentation of multiple violations: unpermitted construction, violation of HOA bylaws, retaliation through fines, and potential property damage. We can pursue this on several fronts." What would that look like? First, we file an injunction preventing the HOA from collecting the retaliatory fine and from taking any further action regarding your property. Second, we file a complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate, which oversees HOA conduct. They can impose penalties and force the HOA to follow proper procedures. Third, we pursue a civil suit for damages, harassment, and violation of property rights. That sounds like a lot. It is, but it's necessary. Barbara Henderson needs to understand that she can't bully homeowners without consequences, and other HOAs need to see that there are legal remedies when boards exceed their authority. I agreed to let Patricia represent me, and she immediately filed the necessary paperwork. Within a week, I received notice that the retaliatory fine had been suspended pending review, and the HOA was ordered to attend a mediation session. Meanwhile, Olivia called with an update on the permit application. They filed it, and it's exactly as problematic as I expected. Wrong location relative to the utility easement, no drainage impact study, and no documentation of homeowner consent. My department denied it with a detailed explanation of deficiencies. Can they appeal? They can, but they'd have to address all the deficiencies first. The utility easement issue alone is insurmountable without major expense. I don't think they'll pursue it. But Barbara Henderson was nothing if not stubborn. She filed an appeal, hired an engineering firm to conduct a drainage study, and even appeared at a city planning commission meeting to argue her case. Olivia couldn't be at that meeting due to the conflict of interest, but she told me afterward what happened. "The commission unanimously denied the appeal," she said. "Barbara tried to argue that the HOA has special authority for neighborhood improvements, but the commissioners shut that down quickly. One of them even cited your newspaper article and asked if this was the same project that had been done without homeowner consent. Barbara tried to claim you'd been properly notified, but she couldn't provide proof of certified mail or delivery confirmation. So it's really over? No wall? No wall, at least not where they wanted to build it. The only way they could get approval would be to move it significantly onto your private property with your written permission, which I'm guessing you won't give." You're guessing correctly. The mediation session was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon at the HOA office. Patricia Hughes accompanied me, and we faced Barbara Henderson, two other board members I didn't know well, and the HOA's attorney, a nervous-looking man who seemed to realize his client had made serious mistakes. The mediator, a retired judge named Arthur Morrison, laid out the ground rules and then asked Barbara to explain the HOA's position. "The Saguaro Ridge HOA has a responsibility to maintain property values and aesthetic standards," Barbara began, her voice tight. "Mr. Bryant's property, while generally well-maintained, has elements that are visible from common areas and detract from the neighborhood's appearance. The wall was intended to screen those elements for the benefit of all residents." "Mrs. Henderson," Judge Morrison said, "did the HOA obtain Mr. Bryant's written permission before commencing construction on his property?" "We sent notification as required by our bylaws." "That's not what I asked. Did you obtain his written permission?" Barbara hesitated. "We don't need permission for common area improvements." "The construction site is not in a common area. It's on Mr. Bryant's private property. Did you obtain his permission?" "No," Barbara admitted, her jaw clenched. "Did you file for the necessary city permits before beginning construction?" We believed HOA authority superseded city permitting requirements." "That belief was incorrect, as evidenced by the stop work order. Mrs. Henderson, let me be clear. The HOA violated city ordinances, violated its own bylaws by not holding a vote on a major expenditure, and violated Mr. Bryant's property rights. Then, after the city shut down your illegal construction, you fined Mr. Bryant for the mess you created. Does that about sum it up?" Barbara's face was red. "We were acting in the best interests of the community." "The road to legal liability is paved with good intentions," Judge Morrison said dryly. He turned to Patricia. "What is your client seeking?" Removal of the foundation at HOA expense, written guarantee that no further construction will be attempted on his property without his explicit written consent, rescission of the retaliatory fine, a formal apology from the board, and compensation for his time and stress in dealing with this situation. The HOA attorney whispered urgently to Barbara, who looked like she'd swallowed something sour. Finally, she nodded. "We can agree to remove the foundation," the attorney said, "and we'll rescind the fine. But Mrs. Henderson feels she was acting appropriately given her position, and she's not comfortable issuing an apology." Patricia smiled coldly. "Then we'll see you in court. I'm confident a judge will be even less sympathetic than this mediator, and the damages we'll seek will be considerably higher than what we're asking for now. Your choice." More whispering. Barbara looked like she might explode, but the attorney was clearly advising her to settle. The other board members, who'd been silent until now, both nodded at her. "Fine," Barbara bit out. "We'll issue an apology." A written apology, signed by all board members and delivered to Mr. Bryant and published in the next HOA newsletter, Patricia clarified. "Agreed," the attorney said quickly before Barbara could object. "And compensation," Patricia pressed. "What amount are we discussing?" $5,000 for Mr. Bryant's time, stress, and the damage to his property. The attorney calculated something on his legal pad, conferred with Barbara, and nodded. "Agreed." Judge Morrison drew up the settlement agreement, all parties signed it, and I walked out of that office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Barbara Henderson wouldn't even look at me, and I didn't care. She'd finally been held accountable. The foundation was removed 2 weeks later by a different contractor, and my yard was restored to its original condition. The HOA even paid for additional landscaping to cover the areas disturbed by the construction. The written apology appeared in the newsletter, though it was clearly written by the attorney and not by Barbara. It was stiff and formal, but it acknowledged wrongdoing, and that was what mattered. The best part came a month later when Tom Chen called with exciting news. "We did it, Richard. We got enough signatures to call for a special election. Barbara Henderson has been removed as HOA president." "You're kidding." "Not kidding. Once your story came out and people saw the settlement agreement, other homeowners started sharing their experiences. Turns out, Barbara had been bullying people for years. The Martins, the Johnsons, the Rodriguez family, they all had stories of ridiculous fines and harassment. We gathered signatures from 60% of homeowners calling for her removal, and the board had no choice but to hold a vote. Who's the new president? Guess? Not you? Me. Can you believe it? I never wanted to be HOA president, but people felt like we needed someone who actually cares about the community instead of just power tripping. My first act is going to be reviewing all fines issued in the past 2 years and refunding any that were unjust. I congratulated Tom, genuinely happy that something good had come from my ordeal. The neighborhood felt different after that, lighter somehow. People were friendlier, more willing to wave and chat. It was as if Barbara's removal had lifted a cloud of fear that had been hanging over everyone. Olivia came over for dinner one evening, and we sat on my back patio watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and purple. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she said. "A lot of people would have just paid the fine and tried to keep their heads down." "I learned from the best," I replied. "Your mother never backed down from bullies. She taught me that sometimes you have to stand up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable." Mom would have loved seeing Barbara Henderson's face during that mediation. "She would have," I agreed, smiling at the thought. "How are things at work? Any fallout from the whole situation?" "Actually, it's been positive. The city council commended my department for enforcing permitting requirements consistently, regardless of who was involved, and I've had several residents reach out to thank me for helping protect property rights." "No one suggested there was a conflict of interest?" "A few people asked, but I documented everything carefully. Every decision was based on code and regulation, not personal relationships. The fact that the Planning Commission unanimously upheld our permit denial showed that our department's assessment was correct." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky darken and stars begin to emerge. "You know what's funny?" I said eventually. "If Barbara had just talked to me like a reasonable person, we could have worked something out, maybe some strategic landscaping or a trellis or something. Instead, she went nuclear and lost everything." Pride goes before destruction, Olivia quoted. Barbara Henderson's problem was thinking her title made her untouchable. She forgot that she was supposed to serve the homeowners, not rule over them. About 6 months after the whole ordeal concluded, I was working in my front yard when a car pulled up. To my surprise, Barbara Henderson got out. She looked different, older somehow, less polished than before. Her hair was in a simple ponytail, and she wasn't wearing her usual designer clothes. "Mr. Bryant," she said, stopping at the edge of my driveway. "Do you have a moment?" I set down my gardening shears, wary. "What can I do for you, Barbara?" I wanted to apologize. I mean, really apologize, not the lawyer-written statement that went in the newsletter. This caught me off guard. "Okay. I handled the situation with your property completely wrong. I was so focused on what I thought was best for the neighborhood that I forgot to consider you as a person with rights and feelings. I convinced myself that I was doing the right thing, that the ends justified the means. I was wrong." "What brought this on?" I asked, genuinely curious. Barbara sighed, looking tired. "Losing the HOA presidency forced me to take a hard look at who I'd become. My husband suggested I might want to talk to someone, so I've been seeing a therapist. She's helped me realize that I was using my position to control things because so much in my life felt out of control. It wasn't about property values or neighborhood aesthetics. It was about feeling powerful in a world where I felt powerless. That's pretty insightful. It's embarrassing, honestly. I spent years making people miserable because I had my own issues to deal with. I can't undo what I did, but I wanted you to know that I understand now how wrong I was. And I'm sorry." I studied her for a moment, this woman who'd caused me so much trouble. She seemed genuine, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. "I appreciate you telling me this," I said. "It takes courage to admit when you're wrong. I also wanted you to know that I'm moving. My husband got a job offer in Colorado and we're taking it. Fresh start for both of us. I hope it goes well for you." "Thank you. And Mr. Bryant, your daughter is lucky to have you. The whole time I was fighting you, you kept your composure and did things the right way. That says a lot about your character." After she left, I thought about her words. It would have been easy to hold on to anger, to refuse her apology. But what good would that do? She'd been held accountable, she'd lost her position, and now she was trying to make amends and better herself. That was really all anyone could ask. Life in the neighborhood improved dramatically under Tom's leadership. He reduced HOA fees by 20% after an audit revealed unnecessary expenditures, established a committee to review all fines before they were issued, and created a suggestion box where homeowners could propose improvements anonymously. The walking path got new lighting. The community center got updated fitness equipment, and people actually started attending HOA meetings because they felt their voices mattered. Olivia got a promotion at work, becoming the deputy director of city planning for all of Scottsdale, not just our district. She thrived in the role, making decisions that balanced development with preservation, growth with sustainability. Watching her succeed in her career reminded me why I'd fought so hard against Barbara's overreach. It wasn't just about my property. It was about the principle that rules and regulations exist to serve people, not the other way around. One evening, about a year after everything had settled, Tom hosted a neighborhood barbecue in the common area. It was the first one in years, and the turnout was amazing. Families I'd never really talked to, kids playing on the grass, everyone relaxed and happy. Tom pulled me aside at one point. "You know, Richard, none of this would have happened if you hadn't stood up to Barbara. You started something." "I just didn't want a wall blocking my view," I said, deflecting. "It was more than that. You showed people that it's okay to question authority when authority is wrong. You reminded us that we're a community, not subjects of some petty tyrant. That matters." Looking around at the neighbors laughing and enjoying themselves, I had to admit he was right. Sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone. Sometimes refusing to back down from a bully creates space for positive change. My property never did get that wall, and I couldn't be happier about it. The view from my western side yard remained open, overlooking the walking path and the desert preserve beyond. On clear nights, I could sit out there and watch the stars without any obstructions, exactly as it should be. The lesson I took from the whole experience was simple. HOAs can serve a valuable purpose when run by people who remember their stewards, not dictators. Rules and regulations need to be applied fairly, with common sense and respect for individual property rights. And when those in charge forget these principles, it's up to the community to hold them accountable. Barbara Henderson taught me that through negative example. Tom Chen taught me through positive leadership. And Olivia taught me that sometimes the best weapon against bureaucratic overreach is simply knowing the rules better than those trying to abuse them. I never did find out whether Barbara intentionally withheld that first notification or if it genuinely got lost in the mail. In the end, it didn't matter. Her failure to follow proper procedures, her disregard for my property rights, and her retaliatory behavior would have been wrong regardless of whether I'd received notification. The notification itself wouldn't have given her the authority she claimed to have. The abandoned foundation in my yard had been a temporary eyesore, but its removal left the ground ready for new landscaping. I planted a beautiful desert garden in that spot, with prickly pear cacti, ocotillo, and brilliant red penstemons. It became my favorite part of the yard, a living reminder that even when someone tries to build walls around you, you can create something beautiful in the aftermath. Olivia helped me choose the plants, coming over on weekends to dig holes and arrange stones. We worked side by side in the warm Arizona sun, not talking much, just enjoying the simple satisfaction of creating something together. These were the moments I treasured most, the ordinary moments of connection with my daughter. "You know, Dad," she said one afternoon as we spread decomposed granite around the new plantings, "I've been thinking about what happened with Barbara and the HOA. It's kind of a metaphor for what I deal with at work every day." "How so?" "People trying to shortcut the system because they think their personal vision or authority trumps established rules. Developers who want zoning variances without proper justification. Contractors who think permits are optional. Politicians who pressure my department to approve projects that don't meet code. It's all the same mentality, just on different scales." "How do you handle it?" "The same way you did. Document everything, follow the rules precisely, and don't let anyone intimidate me into bending procedures. My job is to serve the public good, not individual interests. That means sometimes telling powerful people no. It can't be easy. It's not. But it's right. And in the long run, enforcing standards consistently protects everyone, just like holding the HOA accountable protected not just you, but every homeowner in this neighborhood." We finished the garden as the sun set, stepping back to admire our work. It looked perfect, natural, and beautiful, the kind of desert landscaping that belonged in Arizona. No walls, no barriers, just an open view and plants that had evolved to thrive in this harsh, magnificent environment. Several months later, I received a letter from the Arizona Department of Real Estate. Their investigation into the HOA had concluded, and they'd imposed penalties and required the Saguaro Ridge HOA to implement new oversight procedures. All future board members would be required to complete training on HOA law and homeowner rights. Any construction projects over $5,000 would require not just board approval, but a vote by the general membership. And all homeowners who'd been improperly fined during Barbara's tenure would receive refunds with interest. The letter also noted that my complaint had prompted a broader review of HOA practices statewide, leading to proposed legislation that would strengthen homeowner protections and increase penalties for HOAs that violated regulations. My situation had become a catalyst for reform. I shared the letter with Olivia over dinner that night, and she grinned. "You're famous, Dad. You're the case study that's going to be cited in HOA law classes." "I'd rather be anonymous and drama-free," I said, but I was smiling too. "Too late for that. You're the guy who stood up to the tyrannical HOA president and won. Own it." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after that. I volunteered on the HOA Architectural Committee under Tom's leadership, helping review requests for modifications and improvements. It was interesting work, and I made sure we applied standards fairly and reasonably, always remembering what it felt like to be on the receiving end of arbitrary decisions. The neighborhood thrived. Property values actually increased once word got out that we'd reformed our HOA governance. People wanted to live in a community where homeowners' rights were respected and leadership was accountable. Several real estate agents even started advertising Saguaro Ridge as a model HOA community, which Tom found hilarious. We went from dysfunctional disaster to model community in less than 2 years, he said at one board meeting, all because one guy refused to accept an illegal wall. And had a daughter who knew every city code, I added. That definitely didn't hurt, Tom agreed. I stayed in touch with Patricia Hughes, the attorney who'd represented me. She successfully brought several other cases against abusive HOAs, creating legal precedents that protected homeowners across Arizona. She called me occasionally to discuss new cases, and I was always happy to share my experience and offer encouragement to other homeowners fighting similar battles. One call came from a man dealing with an HOA that was trying to force him to remove solar panels from his roof. The HOA claimed the panels were an aesthetic violation, even though Arizona law specifically protected homeowners' rights to install solar energy devices. Don't back down, I told him. Document everything, know your rights, and don't let them intimidate you. And if you need help, call Patricia Hughes. She's the best. A few weeks later, he called back to thank me. The HOA had backed down once he'd cited the relevant statutes and hired Patricia. His solar panels stayed, and the HOA revised its regulations to comply with state law. These small victories added up, creating a network of informed, empowered homeowners who refused to accept overreach. It reminded me that individual acts of resistance, when shared and supported, could create meaningful change. 2 years after the wall incident, the neighborhood held a celebration for Tom, who was stepping down as HOA president to focus on his family. His wife had just had twins, and he needed to redirect his energy. At the party, someone suggested we name the walking path after him in recognition of his service. Absolutely not, Tom said, laughing. But if you want to do something meaningful, create a homeowner rights fund. Set aside money to help any resident who needs legal assistance dealing with outside issues. Make sure no one ever has to face what Richard faced alone. The motion passed unanimously, and the Saguaro Ridge Homeowner Rights Fund was established. Every HOA member contributed $25, creating a pool of several $1,000s available to any homeowner who needed help protecting their rights. It was a perfect legacy for Tom's tenure, and a guarantee that Barbara Henderson's style of leadership could never take root again. Olivia continued to excel in her career, eventually being appointed to the State Planning Commission, advising on development policies across Arizona. She credited our experience with the HOA as teaching her important lessons about standing firm on principle, even under pressure. Every time a politician or developer tries to pressure me into cutting corners, I think about Barbara Henderson and what happens when people in authority stop following rules, she told me. It keeps me honest. As for me, I found contentment in my daily life. My garden flourished, my home remained wall-free, and my relationship with my neighbors was better than ever. The trauma of Margaret's death had softened into bittersweet memory, and I'd built a good life in Scottsdale. The whole experience taught me that home isn't just a physical space. It's a community, a network of relationships, and a set of shared values. When those things are threatened, fighting to protect them isn't just about property rights. It's about preserving the kind of world we want to live in, the kind of community we want to be part of. Barbara Henderson had tried to build a wall around my property, but she'd inadvertently torn down walls between neighbors. She'd tried to assert power, but she'd sparked a movement toward accountability. She'd intended to diminish me, but she'd given me an opportunity to discover strength I didn't know I had. In the end, the best revenge wasn't punishment or vindication. It was building something better in the space where conflict had been. It was watching a community heal and grow stronger. It was knowing that my daughter had used her position and knowledge to protect not just her father, but the principles that made cities livable and laws meaningful. Sometimes I walked past the spot where that foundation had briefly marred my yard. My desert garden had filled in beautifully, the plants mature and healthy. Hummingbirds visited the penstemons, and occasionally I'd spot a lizard basking on the warm rocks. It was exactly the kind of peaceful, natural space I'd envisioned when I bought this house. No walls, no barriers, just open sky and desert beauty, protected by knowledge, courage, and a daughter who knew that city planning codes existed for good reasons. Barbara Henderson had wanted to wall off my property. Instead, she'd opened doors for reform, accountability, and community building that benefited everyone. And that, I decided, was the best possible outcome of what had started as a nightmare morning with concrete trucks in my yard. Justice served, lessons learned, and a neighborhood transformed from fearful to flourishing. The wall that never was had become a story worth telling, a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of resistance create the biggest changes.